Live from Nashville, Tennessee on Music Row, it is the nation's #1 show for the family caregiver. And we are thrilled to have you with us. 800-688-9522 if you want to be on the show. My name is Peter Rosenberger. I am so grateful that you're a part of this journey, and we also want to welcome all the folks listening on the Truth Network across the country. We are the first syndicated radio show for the family caregiver. We are the nation's leading show for the family caregiver because there are 65 million people right now who are putting themselves between a vulnerable loved one and even worse disaster. And this show is all about helping them stay stronger, healthier, calmer, and dare I say it, even more joyful as we deal with these harsh realities. And this is what this show is committed to. This is what we're committed to. And at the end of this show, our goal is that you will have your hearts lifted, your eyes lifted, and have practical guides to what real help looks like for you. And we're real serious about it. If you want to be on the show, 800-688-9522. Maybe this is the first time my goodness, a show for caregivers. Who'd have thunk it? Well, I thunk it. Because I've been a caregiver myself now for over 31 years through a medical nightmare, and I know how difficult the journey is. I know how challenging it is. I know how crushing it is. And I purposed in my mind that I was going to offer the same help that I've received over the years from so many people. But what I've done is I've aggregated it down into one streaming direction for caregivers. And just last week, we took this show national on the Truth Network. We are deeply honored that they saw the value in this and said, look, let's take it to an even larger audience. And we've been doing this, and we're just thrilled to have you along. So those of you who listen all over North Carolina and Salt Lake and Richmond and Des Moines, we're just thrilled to have you along. Hey, when you do call that number, 800-688-9522, you're going to hear the kind and caring voice of himself, the Baron of the Board, the Sultan of Sound, the Earl of Engineering, the man who puts the word care into scare. He is the Count of Mighty Disco, John Butler, everyone.
Well, Halloween is just around the corner.
The word care into scare.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, better than putting the fun in funeral, I guess.
I don't even know what to say to that.
It doesn't merit a response.
And it shall get none.
Well, I actually stole that from our good friend Harry Anderson on Night Court.
The Night Court, yes. I know. Yes. He's a personal hero of yours.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The art of the prank is something that is near and dear to my heart. And I can trace its origin to that character on that show.
Somehow that just makes perfect sense.
Oh, well, thank you.
It wasn't meant as such, but take it anyway. Hey, listen, John, we did it last week. We did it.
Absolutely.
We went syndication.
And it is a deep honor, actually. I usually have some snarky comeback or whatever, but that is something that really it is quite touching. The
moment deserves that kind of respect for it, because right now the folks in Salt Lake that are tuning in to the Truth Network channel there, they are listening, and then you've got people in Richmond and Des Moines and Charlotte, big market over in Charlotte, and Raleigh-Durham, Winston-Salem, High Point, Gastonia, all over, and then people are streaming the show also all over the country and into Canada.
Absolutely. And a lot of those people are caregivers.
Well, they are. Yeah. 65 million caregivers.
Yeah.
And when you have 65 million caregivers, that's a significant number of people that have been heretofore unaddressed. Well, and, as a collective,
exactly, by any sort of media or anything like that. Yeah, and there's stuff here and there, but as far as a radio show is concerned, this is really the first time that somebody has done this sort of thing. And it's interesting that you say that they've been underserved, because I was thinking about this earlier, that not a lot of caregivers really define themselves as such. And
this whole journey started with that phrase, caregivers not defining themselves as such. And I remember AARP has been one of the sponsors of the show for a long time, and I was in this studio right here on Music Row, at the spacious and cavernous iHeart Studios. Opulent, even. Let's go spacious and cavernous.
Oh, okay.
No, I love my studio.
It actually is really nice.
I love the studio here. And it's I was sitting here and they said, well, what about these folks that don't identify as a caregiver? They go along and just do their job, but they don't really think of themselves as a part of a group of people that are doing this particular task.
Yeah, they think of themselves as wives or husbands or children or parents or whatever.
Or a friend or neighbor.
Yeah.
And they said, how do you help somebody know if they're a caregiver? And for a brief moment, I lapsed into my best Jeff Foxworthy impersonation, and I said, if you have a professional carpet cleaner on retainer, you're probably a caregiver.
Yeah.
And they thought that was kind of funny. And it I guess it is funny. It was. I mean, I just thought of that because I thought that's the journey of us as a caregiver.
Well, and you didn't really have to think of a punchline because you do, in fact, have a professional carpet cleaner on retainer.
Yes,
You're right.
I do.
You just tell the truth and you're all right. Yes.
And so they said, that's really funny. You ought to do those things with Jeff and do it kind of as a PSA kind of thing, a public service announcement and so forth. And so we did. I called up Jeff and I asked him, I said,
because you knew Jeff before this.
We did. And we've been friends for a while. And I called him up and said, hey, you want to do this with me? And he said, well, write out some jokes and we'll see. And I said,
let me check your work.
They're not jokes, Jeff. This is my life. And I said, this isn't a joke. It's my life. And so we did it, and they keep growing. Then
why not both?
Well, it is. And so I tell you what, I'll do a few of them. For those of you just now joining across the country on the Truth Network who's thought, what is this show? Who is this guy? And
who let him in the studio?
Who gave him the keys to the studio? What madness is this? Here's a show. Here's a couple of ways to show if you're a caregiver or not. All right, you ready?
I'm with you.
If you're on a first name basis with the hospital security guard, see you tomorrow, Earl. If you could have a 10-minute conversation about gauze.
Oh, man. I haven't heard that one. That's new to me, and I've heard all these.
If you have ever used Neosporin as a verb, hold still, baby. I got a Neosporin this so we get to church on time.
Look, if you do this, you gotta give me warning because I got to get a rim shot set up.
Bless your heart. Let's see, what's another one? If you've ever hooked up your wife's wheelchair to your dog just to see if it would work. And I have footage of that. And Gracie she's actually screaming down the street as she's doing that.
Well, your dog is a border collie, right?
He's an Australian Shepherd, and he loves to pull things. And so he just goes. And I've been dog sledding before, which is a wonderful event. Wheelchair sledding, not so much. But if you've done that, you're a caregiver. If a hospital bed has never hampered your love life.
Oh, watch
Jeff looked at me and he said, really? And I said, dude, man, she's had 30 years of surgery, man. And he said, well, there ain't no use wasting a semi-private room. And I thought, and I'll give you one more here. If while at the grocery store, you're the one asking for a price check on suppositories, you're probably a caregiver. So there's more of those things you can go see about at our website at caregiverswithhope.com.
And this speaks to something that is near and dear to both our hearts, and I feel should be near and dear to most caregivers' hearts, and that is that laughter is the best medicine.
It is, and I think sometimes we're afraid to laugh because what we deal with is so serious. I get that. But I've been dealing with a medical nightmare now for over 31 years. If I wait for that to stop being so serious before I start laughing, I'll never laugh. And
that's no way to live.
No, it's not. Gracie's up to almost 80 surgeries, and then she's had nearly that same amount of smaller procedures. She's got one tomorrow. And then she's had 80-plus doctors have treated her, 12 different hospitals, 7 different insurance companies, $10 million, both legs amputated, just relentless stuff that she deals with. And it doesn't go away. And it's not going to go away. In fact, it's probably going to get more challenging. And so how do we live? I can't wait for her to get better or worse before I start living a healthy life. That's no way to live. I mean, when you're 31 years into this thing, eventually you figure out, wait a minute, I'm not waiting for this to go so I can get on with my life. This is my life. And that's part of the journey of caregivers, is learning to deal with that sort of thing. So let me ask you this. Do you know what today's caregiver tip is today, John? I haven't. Well, see, I never tell John. There's no coordination between John of any kind.
Well, we are rather uncoordinated people.
On so many levels. But today's caregiver tip, if you don't make it worse, it counts as a win. It counts as a win. Now, the reason I say this is because we as caregivers tend to often get ourselves so in the zone of somehow that we've got to fix things. And we're not going to feel good about this thing. It's not going to feel like a win until we solve something. Well, when you're dealing with a chronic, relentless barrage of issues that are going on in a disability or an impairment of some kind, whether it's age-related or congenital and so forth, making it worse is what you want to avoid. And if you don't make it worse, it's okay to classify that in the win column. You've done something extraordinary. You're not there to solve it. You're just there to navigate through it peacefully, as calmly as you can. And that's the whole point of it. Hey, listen, there's so much more to talk about, and we want to hear from you. 800-688-9522. Maybe you're just now hearing the show for the first time and you're thinking, oh my, this is me. This is my life. Then this is your show. And we want you to call in 800-688-9522, 800-688-9522. This is Peter Rosenberger. This is the nation's #1 show for the family caregiver. We're glad you're with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the show for caregivers, about caregivers, hosted by a caregiver. I am Peter Rosenberger, bringing you 30-plus years of experience to help you stay strong and healthy as you take care of someone who is not. And we're glad you're with us. 800-688-9522, 800-688-9522. And if you are joining us across the country on the Truth Network, welcome. We've been doing the show now for over 4 years here from 1510 WLAC on Music Row in Nashville at the iHeart Studios. And just last week, we flipped the switch and went national. And I'm so grateful for a lot of folks. And I don't want to ever fail to mention the folks at the Truth Network who have worked very hard to help bring this about. Robbie Dilmore, Stu Epperson, and so many, Joey, and so many of the others. And, of course, John Butler here in the studio, our producer, and the team here at 1510 WLAC who's worked with them in the iHeart family here in Nashville. This is a big deal. 65 million people, 65 million people, and the numbers are growing and getting significantly, the situation is getting significantly more difficult for families. Families are coming to blows over this. And I'm seeing it right and left. John, I had the opportunity this week. I was out speaking in Knoxville, Pigeon Forge area, and then I went up to Delaware and spoke at the Easter Seals event up there and had a marvelous time. It's my second trip to Delaware this year.
Yeah.
And I've never been to Delaware in my life until this year, and I've been twice.
Hey, there you go.
But I see the need that's going on. I see the look in folks' eyes, and they're beaten down, they're weary, they're frustrated, and I am more resolved than ever that we've got to have an outlet for these caregivers to come to a safe place where they can share their own journey, share their own heart, and engage in a way that gives them practical help. That's not just platitudes or Hallmark cards. And I was speaking to the crowd there in Delaware for the Easter Seals event. They had an annual conference for caregivers. And let me just say, and I know there's some folks in Delaware listening right now, let me say how much I enjoy those events. They are just delightful to me. And then I had the opportunity at Gatlinburg. I spoke at a health fair that had part of the deal was it was at Dixie Stampede with Dolly Parton.
Yeah. You were telling me about this.
I've never been to that, and it was quite a show.
Yes, it is.
I mean, they're like buffalo and all the horseback riding of these folks, and I kind of was one of the openers of it.
Yeah, because you were on the stage.
Yeah, I was on the stage. The stage that lifts up all the way to the ceiling. It's amazing what Dolly Parton has done over there. This is truly stunning.
I have ceased to be amazed at that woman because she is just a godsend.
I mean, and what she's like, I think the biggest employer in the county. I
Nice.
mean, what she's done over there in Sevier County and so forth. But the folks over there treated me so well. And I had a lot of folks came up to me afterwards, and I had a lady particularly came up to me, just grabbed my hand, and she said, "You made me feel normal. You made me feel normal." And I don't think I could get higher praise.
Well, and this speaks to I got a phone call over the break. It was from Donna in Nashville. And she was listening to the show. She didn't have time to be on the air, but she wanted to show her appreciation for what we're doing. And the thing that really helped her out was there's no waiting to get on with your life. This is it.
This is it. This is your life. Now let's make it a great one, and we're going to talk about that on the show. And that's what this show is about, how you can be healthy in the midst of unhealthiness.
Well, she had a Foxworthy joke for you.
Oh, Donna, she's calling him with the Foxworthy joke.
Yeah. So if you have ever taken a picture of your husband's butt to send to the nurse, you might be a caregiver.
Did she have to use vertical or horizontal?
Portrait
or landscape?
Yeah.
I mean,
watch it.
I mean, that's where it gets a little bit dicey. How dicey? Well, that's funny, Donna. That is just funny. If you've taken a picture of your husband's butt to send to the doctor, you know what? We can laugh about that because.
Well, because you have to.
That's our life, but again, we can choose to be as miserable or as happy as we want to be. We've got to do some unseemly things as caregivers.
That's not to say that this is without pain.
No, there's plenty of pain, but the problem is the pain is often so loud that it convinces us that there's no joy, and that's a lie. There is joy. There is a lot of joy. I'm 31 years into this thing. And you can tell by the tone of the show and by our life, we're goofy, we're funny, we love laughter, we love jokes, and we love life. Yes, we grieve, but my goal is to help my fellow caregivers grieve in a healthy manner, not grieve with clenched fist and rage out. And we can do this. It takes a little work.
A lot of practice.
A lot of practice, a lot of repetition, a lot of support, and a lot of community to help reinforce this. And that's why I do the show. Because I am not going to leave folks abandoned with this. Isolation is one of the toughest issues we face as a caregiver. And now we've got a path towards punching into that isolation with this show. And if you want to be on the show, and if you got a caregiver joke, if you got a redneck joke, you got to call Jeff. If you got a caregiver joke, you got to call me. 800-688-9522. I'll give you one more, by the way. If you could cook a turkey with dressing while changing a dressing.
Oh, man.
That's for you, Donna.
Yes.
And, my favorite, though, is when Jeff does this, because Gracie's a double amputee. She has both legs below the knee. Or amputated. She wears prosthetic limbs, and Jeff says, if anybody's ever seriously asked you, baby, have you seen my left leg? You're probably a caregiver. And that would just bust me up every time. He did that to me on the fly. That was not part of the script. We didn't write that out.
Oh, yeah.
He just did that, and it was part of the outtakes we did with that. And,
almost like he was a professional.
Well, he is a pro, and I'm just grateful to bask in his presence. But we are serious about what we do here is strengthening a family caregiver, and we got a lot of people that help you do it. And we provide resources. Our sponsors that we have on the show, we look for folks that have resources that can help a caregiver. One of those is 101 Mobility. I was over at a friend's house the other day. They got the call this summer. Father had fallen. His elderly father had fallen. Hurt pretty bad, and getting him home after a lengthy period of rehab, they needed to make some modifications to the home. So I put them in touch with my friends at 101 Mobility, Cecil Rainey and Jerry Kiefer here in the Middle Tennessee area, but 101 Mobility has places all over across the country. But right here, I mean, if you need a ramp, I mean, it's one thing to get them into the home, but maybe you got 2 or 3 steps. Well, guess what? When you're in a wheelchair, when you got somebody who's impaired, 2 or 3 steps becomes a major problem. So give them a call, 615-830-6478, 615-830-6478, and let them come in and start helping you adapt your home, adapt your car so that you can do this. And speaking of adapting, guess what we put in the car this week for my wife?
Oh, what was this?
Hand controls.
Oh, Right on.
She hasn't driven in some time because of some other issues, but she's getting stronger. She's getting better. And now she's ready to start resuming driving. And I'm ready to start resuming therapy. And so, no, she's a fine driver. She used to drive her kids around a lot when they were growing up. She does fine, and I'm so happy for her that she's going to have that independence. So we got to go out and do a little practicing.
Yeah, absolutely.
But she's going to do it. So
hit up the mall parking lot. Beware,
Nashville. Gracie's cutting loose, baby. Hey, listen, 800-688-9522, 800-688-9522 if you want to be on the show. And we're just grateful that you're with us. Thank you. Thank you so much for being a part of this show. CaregiversWithHope.com. There's more to go. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the show for caregivers, about caregivers, hosted by a caregiver, bringing you more than 3 decades of experience. That's not 1 decade. That's not 2 decades. That is 3+ decades of experience to help you stay strong and healthy as you take care of someone who's not. You know why I like that song, by the way? It's not really the song as much as I like the group, Dire Straits, because many caregivers are in...
Dire Straits.
Thank you, John. See, I set him up. You knock him down.
Hey, I'm with it. Well, the reason I like that song...
You like it for the Ballad of Jed Clampett, I know.
I actually like it. Well, yes, because here's the thing. Weird Al, when he parodied that, he called up Mark Knopfler, who is one of the best guitarists that ever walked the planet.
He is indeed.
I
would concur.
Absolutely. Well, he played with Chet Atkins once, really.
Who is revered here in the Music City.
There's we're on the corner of Chet Atkins Boulevard and 17th Avenue South right now.
Yes.
But Weird Al calls up Mark Knopfler and says, hey, because he does this with all of his songs, and says, hey, can I do a parody of Money for Nothing? And Mark Knopfler says, oh, yeah, man, but you got to let me play guitar on it.
And he did.
And he nails it better than the studio track of Money for Nothing.
I mean,
it's better. It's legit better.
And you'll have to. Those of you joining us on the Truth Network, actually anybody listening to us,
really require an explanation.
You have to understand. John and I have these transition moments of nerddom, and both of us are Weird Al Yankovic fans.
Well. Because everyone should. The national treasure, Weird Al Yankovic.
Yes, but UHF, that fine cinema giant of a movie, which was the beginning of Michael Richards' career.
Absolutely.
You could see the embryonic Kramer in it from Seinfeld. You could see it because the first season of Seinfeld, he played Kramer like he did Stanley Spadowski.
Which was the character he played on UHF.
With his mop.
With his mop.
Anyway, all right, that's enough of that silliness. But so many caregivers are in dire straits. And this show is all about helping you navigate to a place of safety. And that's what we're about, so that you can make better decisions. Please do not in any way think that you're going to solve this thing. We're not called to solve it. We don't have the ability to solve it. In fact, let's take a test right now. Everybody's listening. If you're not driving, well, if you are driving, put your hands at 10 and 2 on the wheel and look at your hands. And if anybody sees nail prints, okay, now you could solve the problem. But since none of us have nail prints in our hands, this is beyond our pay grade. And that's the first step right now, is recognizing that this is not ours. You know, a reporter asked me a long time ago, what's the toughest thing for you as a caregiver? Now, I think about all the surgeries. I think about all the stuff that I've gone through with Gracie over the years, all the doctors, all the money that I've had to be responsible for. And the toughest thing, bar none, without any exception, is knowing what is mine and not mine to carry. That is the hardest thing for me as a caregiver. Now, I don't know what's the hardest thing for you. You're certainly welcome to tell me, 800-688-9522. But the tasks involved in caregiving don't drain me as much as my conflict that I have on a regular basis of knowing what is mine and what is not mine. Should I push? Should I pull? Should I stand back? Should I move ahead?
Yeah, should I try to fix this? Should I let this play out? Should I do whatever? And this speaks to one of the core messages of the show which is healthy caregivers make better caregivers. And people look at this and they say, okay, well, yeah, I want to be a better caregiver, and I want to do this and that and everything. And some of the advice we give, most of the advice we give, is about taking care of ourselves.
Invariably, that's pretty much all the advice we can give is and then we provide a description of what that looks like.
Exactly. And it's hard for people to hear because it feels selfish. It feels like you're failing the person for whom you're caring. And the response that we give and the end of that conversation ends up looking like, if you don't take care of yourself and you get the flu and you end up in the hospital for X amount of days, or you go batty and you do not take care of yourself spiritually or emotionally or whatever, then you are going to be no good to the individual who you claim to love. And
exactly.
Yeah.
And it's what I call the Delta Doctrine. And the Delta Doctrine, and this is kind of, I've made this up because, I'm Presbyterian and I like words like doctrine. And it's the Delta Doctrine. I was flying out of Atlanta one day on Delta. Duh, everything leaves through Atlanta. That's what it stands for, by the way. That's what Delta stands for. Duh, everything leaves through Atlanta. And the flight attendant comes on and says, hey, put your mask on first. We've all heard that. In fact, every caregiver hears that. Oh, no, you need to put your mask on first. But let me go a little bit deeper than just the general platitude of put your mask on first. Notice that the flight attendant does not say how to open the peanuts or the pretzels, which are surprisingly difficult. The flight attendant does not tell you how to use that atomic suction device in the lavatory called a toilet. They think we're going to just figure that thing out. But they remind us, in accordance with every airline personnel, directive, management, lawyer, government oversight, everybody says we've got to remind people every day, every time, every flight to put their mask on first. Why? Because it's counterintuitive. We just recklessly hurl ourselves at taking care of somebody who's vulnerable. We will hold our breath and try to wait it out. And I want to ask you, how many of you can help somebody when you're passed out? It just doesn't work that way. And yet we feel so guilty. We feel tremendously guilty. Guilt is one of the biggest issues that caregivers face on a regular basis. And it's not guilt over great sins that get big press. I'm talking about just guilt over little stuff like, just wanting to have a quiet meal. Just guilt over wanting to just, watch a TV show interrupted. I thought about, if I ever go on Dr. Phil's show, I could hear Dr. Phil saying to me, John.
Are you going to do it?
I think I will.
All right.
Let me see if I do Dr. Phil. You mean to tell me that you want to eat a meal in peace and quiet? You mean to tell me that you want to be able to watch a television show uninterrupted? Who do you think you are? You can't milk a cow without a bucket. You can't have a goat without a halter. And you can't be a caregiver without losing your mind.
Well done, sir.
Thank you very much. Dr. Phil, everybody. Dr.
Put it in
Phil.
the archives. I love it.
Dr. Phil, everybody. But this is what happens. We beat ourselves up without mercy on this thing. And I'm saying, nay. Let's back up. Let's just put our mask on first, which means let's get a steady flow of oxygen going so that we can make a calmer, rational, reasonable decision in the midst of craziness. If you're having to put your mask on first and on a plane, believe me, the stress level and the chaos is ramped up to about 9.8 on a scale of 2. That's a frightening place. But so is being a caregiver. Being a caregiver is a terrifying place on any given day. You're dealing with stuff that is just crazy. How many of you all have watched somebody code? That's a nightmare in of itself. How many of you watch somebody go into a grand mal seizure? How many of you watch somebody fall and get hurt? How many of you watch somebody just sit there and groan in agony for hours on end? How many of you watch somebody you love listlessly look out the window and you can't reach them? How many of you watch somebody go into surgery and you thinking, okay, this is it. I'm not going to see them again. I've had all of those things.
And
numerous times for each of them.
Yep. And this is not saying that these are rare things for caregivers.
No.
These things happen. These are the things that are very difficult that caregivers deal with on a regular basis.
And so when we deal with this, when we strain over these things, all it does is take off time of our hearts. And we have to, for our own well-being and the well-being of the loved one we have to dial it back a little bit, breathe a little bit slower, and learn how to navigate this thing in calmness and peace. Thou wilt keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee, is what it says in Scripture. You know why it's in there? Because that's how it's done. Lean not unto your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will guide your paths. This is what Proverbs is talking about, in that we lean on our own understanding too much, and it takes us down some dark paths. I've seen my work, and I was talking to somebody the other day. This was so funny. I was on a plane with him somewhere. I don't know where it was, but he was in some kind of, I think he was in some kind of weird cult. And basically he said, we go internally and become our own savior. And I looked at him, I said, you got to be kidding, man. I've seen my own work. I am not going to become my own savior. Not hardly. That is not where I'm going with this. I need a savior far greater than me, and we have one. And the point is not to bail us out of this thing. The point is not to somehow pluck us out of this and put us on the road to happy, happy, happy all the time. The point is not to feel better about this. The point is to be better as we do it. And we can. I'm telling you, we can. I know we can. I live this way myself, and I'm 31 years into this. So if I can do it, and I am the crash test dummy of caregivers, and if I can do it, I know that you can do it. But we cannot do it alone. That is the one thing we cannot do, is to somehow white-knuckle this thing. So I'm glad you're with us across the country on the Truth Network, those of you streaming across the nation and in Canada and around the world. We're just thrilled. We love, John and I love getting to do this show. It is so much fun. We have such a great time.
Well, it's healthy for us to do this show.
It is. I'm preaching to myself here, folks. I've got to hear from somebody with my level of experience, and there's nobody else out there doing it on a show. I'm it. So I just reinforce these things. And we had a wonderful pastor on not too terribly long ago, Robert Morgan. He'll be with us a little bit later on after the first of the year again. I plan on having him on a lot. And he's got a new book out called The Lost Art of Biblical Meditation. I'd recommend you get it if you want to. It's a very helpful book. But one of the things he said on the show, and I'll never forget it, the rest of my life I'll never forget this, he said, we listen to ourselves way too much and talk to ourselves way too little. And by that he means we're listening to our own dark thoughts. But when we say it out loud, when we talk to ourselves, we're strengthening ourselves. We're pushing out truth so that our ears can hear it, and it goes back, recycled back into our hearts. And we say these things out loud. Every time I say these things on the air, when I get out and speak, like I did this week over at these two different events, and I'm going to be out another time this week coming up, I listen, it's strengthening me for the journey. Every time I write something in my books or sit down at the piano and play, that's what I'm doing. And as a caregiver, this is what we have to do. It's not a one-and-done thing, and it's not going to happen that way. So 800-688-9522 if you want to be on the show, 800-688-9522. Speaking of strengthening, John, I went over and picked up a bunch of pylons and knees at the prison this week on Friday.
Explain yourself, sir.
I will. Ain't the first time I've been told that, by the way. Standing with Hope, presenting sponsor of this show, and it's the nonprofit ministry that Gracie and I started many years ago after she lost her legs. And what we do is we have two program areas. One is this show, the Caregiver Outreach, the whole thing we do with family caregivers. The other is the prosthetic limb ministry to Gracie's fellow amputees. And we've been working in West Africa for more than a dozen years. We collect used prosthetic limbs that come in from all over the country. They go to a local prison where inmates volunteer to recycle them. And they'll strip them all the way down to every usable part on that leg we can use, and some arms. We get some arms in. Not very many, but we do get some arms in. But we focus on legs, and we'll strip them down and all the way to the screw level. And we're always needing knees and longer pylons, and then we purchase things. And so I went over there and picked up, 10 longer pylons for above-knee amputees and some knees. I've ordered some more supplies that'll be here tomorrow, and then we'll ship it out to Africa this week. Stockinette and PVA bags. You know what a PVA bag is, John?
Polyvinyl.
I'm impressed.
Acetate?
Yeah. I'm impressed. I think it's acetate. I don't know what the A stands for.
I'm sorry. No, this is I have to explain myself. I remember my polyatomic ions from high school. I'm sorry.
Of course you do. Of course you do. Well, PVA bags.
Okay.
When we make a mold of the person's limb, and then we take that mold and we fit around it with stockinette and carbon fiber, Kevlar. Okay. We pull the PVA bag over it, tie it at the bottom, and then we run the acrylic resin from the top down it, and it creates a suction. We use a vacuum pump, and it pulls it out. It's kind of like sticking an ice cream cone in the hot fudge, and it makes a hard shell around it. And the suction, the PVA bag keeps all this stuff in there, keeps it, and then we cut it all off, and then you've got a socket, and you tear out all the mold, the plaster, and all that stuff, and you're left with a Kevlar socket. And it's very cool, but we have to buy those things.
Right.
Can't recycle those. And so we're all this is going over to Africa this week, and our friends at CoreCivic, CoreCivic.com, have this program at their facility here in Nashville, and they have a lot of faith-based programs for the prisons that they own and run across the country. And it's a great way to engage inmates into a more productive way of participating in life and getting involved in things. And we've been doing this program for many, many years, and it's been a great program that CoreCivic has helped us do. And these faith-based programs really do work, and it reduces recidivism, which is they don't come back to prison. That's the whole point. We don't want them to come back. We want them to move on from it and be done with that part of their life. And it's a great program. And the inmates have to earn the right to go into the shop and do it, and they love doing it. It's interesting work, and you get to work with all kinds of devices and so forth. And so we're just thrilled to have them as part of the team there with it. And it's a great thing, and I love doing it. So I picked up a bunch of those things, and so I'm always traveling. There's always a leg of some kind in my car.
Don't be a hero,
it's
Peter.
like, if I ever get pulled over, Mr. Rosenberg, are those legs in your trunk? Why, yes, officer. Why do you ask? Just like body parts in my car. But it's a great cause, and if you want to be a part of that.
What's Halloween at your house like?
Oh, it's a freak show.
Oh, yes.
But if you want to be a part of that, standingwithhope.com. Go out and look and see the work that we've been doing. So we'll treat these patients for life. I mean, it's not a one and done with these prosthetics, because particularly children are going to grow into, they're going to need more. And we get limbs that come across from all over the nation, and they usually come with a great story.
Well, and I was going to.
The great stories.
Yeah.
Heart-driven stories. I mean, like, this was my husband's. And I didn't know. It's been sitting in our closet for years, and we were afraid to throw it away because it was a part of his life. And we're so grateful that we found this. And so, if you know somebody has a prosthetic limb that they need to donate, whether somebody passed away or it's a child that's outgrown it or whatever, it's just sitting there gathering dust, send it to us.
With both shoes.
With both shoes. we got lots of single shoes. Standingwithhope.com. You'll see right at the top it says donate a used limb. And get involved with what we're doing. We need your help to help support what we do on this show and what we're doing with giving the gift that keeps on walking. What we're doing is we're saying, silver and gold have I none, but such as I have give I thee. In the name of Jesus, stand up and walk. And they do. And you can help us be a part of that today at standingwithhope.com. Hey, listen, we've got more to come. I hear the band playing. By the way, that's our theme song. I wrote that with my buddy Chris Latham. And so you'll hear that song a lot, and we've got to go to a quick break. We'll be right back. This is Peter Rosenberger, 800-688-9522.
She's some kind of wonderful. She's some kind of wonderful. Yes, she is. She's some kind of wonderful. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Welcome back to the show, For Caregivers, About Caregivers, hosted by a caregiver. I am Peter Rosenberger, bringing you 30 years of experience to help you stay strong and healthy as you take care of someone who is not. Some kind of wonderful. Let me tell you about my wife, Gracie. And she wanted to call in today, and she's probably going to be mad at me because I didn't do it. But we had some breaking news here in Middle Tennessee, so we were a little bit all over the map and trying to make sure that things were going okay. There's been a terrible shooting at a church locally here, and so let's keep these folks in your hearts and prayers. And I was afraid that if I tried to maneuver Gracie into the show today, that it would get a little bit all over the map. So thank you for your flexibility on that, Gracie, in advance. And also our hearts are with this church community that is going through this. This is a terrible reminder of the sign of our times right now, that we live in such an environment where these things happen. But I would like to introduce my wife to you and tell you a little bit about her and why this show has come about and all the things that have led to this. And 34 years ago, in November, she was on the way in the middle of the day to go see a friend of hers. She left Nashville. I don't know, about 11 o'clock in the morning, and about halfway to Memphis, she just tuckered out, and she put her head down on the wheel and fell asleep at the wheel and slammed into a cement abutment, flipped the car into a small ravine, and busted everything. I mean, it was a bad, bad, bad car wreck. I didn't think she'd live. The story is pretty involved, and you can see it. Her book is Gracie Standing with Hope. It's available online and on Amazon and wherever books are sold. They can order it if they don't have it. Liberty University Press published that some years ago, and it's a really powerful story of this woman dealing with the horrific aftermath of this wreck. And she was unconscious for about 3 weeks, and finally she woke up into a new life. A life that is filled with relentless pain. She's not known a day without relentless, brutal pain since Reagan's first term. And the surgeries mounted. The nightmare continued. She eventually recovered enough to go back to college where we met. And folks were telling me about her, and I met her, and I'm just saw this beautiful young woman with an enormous courage and gorgeous voice. I mean, when you hear her sing, and we don't have anything up on her, do we, John?
We do not.
Well, I'll get something for that next week. We'll do that next week. We'll probably have her on the show next week. And Gracie's a no-kidding singer. And when I saw this beautiful young woman, and then I heard her sing, and I thought, okay, this is it. I'm going to take care of this woman for the rest of her life. I just didn't know what that meant. I was dumb as a box of hammers. I didn't know anything about health care and insurance or anything. In fact,
much less hammers.
I remember my first corporate job. I don't know if I ever told you this or not, John, but they took us into a meeting and said, we got to have an employee meeting in the break room. We're going to talk about benefits. And I promise you, hand to God, I promise you that I thought they meant longer lunches and better parking when they said benefits.
Uh-huh.
That's how poor my understanding was of the insurance world, and
you were just a wee little caregiver.
Well, no, I was just I really was clueless, and then I took the helm of a medical nightmare. That the moment I got married to her, it became my responsibility. The moment I said I do, it did, and the clock was ticking because she had a conversion policy that would expire at $250,000 once she got married.
Ooh.
That was from her parents' policy and so forth. $250,000. We left $250,000 a very long time ago. And so the moment that happened, I had to start making some decisions. I worked in jobs that I didn't really particularly like in order to have insurance. I've never had a gap in coverage with her. And all these times, and I've changed policies on her 6 times over these 30-something years. I've never lost an insurance appeal. We've had 2 that were stopped because the doctor said it was just taking too long and we went a different direction. But when I got involved, I was relentless. And it's been
everybody listening has been.
Yeah.
You know?
It was, and we can't afford to not be. I mean, but
yeah.
Here, by the way, here's the secret to dealing with insurance companies. Don't get emotional with them. Okay? Because that's not what this is about. Don't get emotional. It's not about trying to appeal to their humanity. In fact, that's one of the reasons I love Medi-Share so much, because it's a whole different way of dealing with health care. It's not insurance, it's sharing, and it's a better way. Medi-Share.com if you want to learn some more, because I'm a part of Medi-Share. And but a long time ago I was not. I was involved with all these different insurance companies, and they would come in, and when they bring a knife to a fight, you take a calculator because math works every time, and you show them financially where it makes more sense to do what you're trying to get them to do, and they'll make the decision 9 times out of 10.
Oh, yeah.
And so you don't get emotional with it. But I went into all that stuff, dealing with doctors. And we'll get into that as the show develops with you guys on the Truth Network, as you start to get to know me a little bit more and know our message. And we'll bring practical tips of dealing with doctors. That's not that complicated to deal with doctors. We'll talk about that. But the thing that was so difficult for me was the relentless onslaught of trying to deal with something that was beyond me, trying to wrap my arms around something, trying to wonder, where is God in this thing? And I was so discouraged, so frustrated, all the above. And that's why I went into some really dark places myself. And I literally have made every mistake you can make as a caregiver. But you don't have to. We can learn from them. We can learn from them. We can share them. And I'm putting it all out there. And my hope and prayer is that you will take me up on it. And you'll listen and you'll say, you know what, this is for me. It is a hard thing to push somebody's wheelchair. It's a hard thing to stand in a hospital room corner. It's a hard thing to stand in a hospital corridor and watch them take them to surgery. It's a hard thing to be up in the middle of the night cleaning up gunk. But you can do this, and we can do it together, and that's what this show is about. CaregiversWithHope.com. If you want to see more, CaregiversWithHope.com. So I'm so glad you spent the time with us today. Hey, this section was brought to you by Caregivers by Whole Care. These are the people that help me take care of Gracie when I'm here and traveling and doing some stuff. 615-298-9201. I trust them with my life. I trust them with my wife. And those are the kind of people I like having as sponsors for this show who will help caregivers with real solutions. 615-298-9201. Caregivers by Whole Care. Hey, John, we're going to need 2 hours, I'm afraid.
I guarantee it.
The show just goes by so fast. I love doing this with you. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week. The podcast will be up here within an hour, caregiverpodcast.com. And you always go out to the website at caregiverswithhope.com. This is Peter Rosenberg. I'll see you next week.